One of the president's top advisors on tariffs is director of the White House National Trade Council, Peter Navarro. Navarro has been a critic of U.S. trade with China. Earlier this month, he criticized Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau for saying Canada would impose retaliatory tariffs on the U.S. But Navarro has not always been a critic of free trade policies. In a recent interview with Axios, Navarro discusses his previous views on free trade and why he changed his mind. Joining me now from Washington is Erica Pandey. She's a reporter for Axios. Erica, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So remind us, first of all, who Peter Navarro is and the role he plays in the president's decision to impose tariffs.
Peter Navarro is the president's top advisor on trade. He has been the architect of a lot of the president's policies when it comes to trade, the most hardline protectionist policies. And, you know, when the president was crafting his trade policy, it was Peter Navarro, the protectionist, against Gary Cohn, the globalist. And Peter Navarro won out. And because of this reason, he's been described as kind of the president's mind meld on tariffs, the one guy in the White House who is fully with the president when it comes to this.
Well, it's really interesting because in his conversation with you, Navarro said he wasn't always a proponent of tariffs. What caused him to change his mind?
Right. So I actually found a book he wrote in 1984 at the George Washington University Library. And if you read that book, he actually espouses all the views that his opponents in the White House did. And when we asked him what changed his mind, it boiled down to one thing in all of his responses, and that was China. And in some ways, he's right. China has been a special case in terms of intellectual property theft, in terms of just the sheer manufacturing power and the overcapacity China has to manufacture steel. But, you know, he wasn't able to explain why there's been the pivot towards putting tariffs on our allies, which has been one of the things the Trump administration has faced most criticism for.
Well, what are some of the other factors, in addition to China, that Navarro said he considers to justify the use of tariffs?
I mean, he's frequently said that tariffs will not, you know, really affect the American consumer all that much. But in his book in 1984, he wrote that consumers would be the biggest losers. He said that the steel industry is, you know, essential to defense, and because of national security reasons, we need to protect the steel industry. But he argued against that in 1984 too. He said that, you know, actually protecting those steel industries could cause them to bloat and cause them to become inefficient. And then he raised a lot of concern about whether imposing tariffs on allies would fracture the U.S.'s alliances with other countries and actually be a net threat to national security instead of helping it.
So how does Peter Navarro feel now about the impacts of tariffs on consumers?
He said recently, actually, on CBS Face the Nation, that he thinks the impact will be negligible to consumers. But, you know, it's interesting because the underlying economics of what he argued in '84 haven't changed. It just seems that he claims that he's had, you know, some sort of an epiphany on trade and on the effect on consumers. But he argues something very different in his book.
Well, what impact does Navarro think these tariffs will have on the relationship between the U.S. and its foreign trading partners?
I mean, he said, you know, that the EU and China have been engaging in unfair trade practices and that alliances are one thing, but enough is enough. But, you know, the impacts are already starting to take shape. You saw in the days leading up to the G7 a lot of anger from European allies over not being exempted from these tariffs. And in his book, he did write that kind of, you know, discord would be could be potentially very dangerous.
Wow, really interesting to hear his views back then as opposed to what he is arguing now. Erica Pandey in Washington for us. Erica, thank you.
Thank you.